Hello folks, my name's Savannah. This is SIRIUSLY, and you're watching Nerdy Cat 96. Oh my goodness, I look like a Teletubby. My bun is standing so high. Thank you so much for joining me for my first segment of We Seriously Need to Wrap This Up. Mwah. So we will start with the books that I have read in the month of August, and then we will get to my TBR. The first book that I read last month was actually a play, and that was Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf by Edward Albee. So this play was pretty funny and entertaining. The only problems that I had with it were that it was written in the 1960s, so there was some linguistic issues, like they used some phrases or words in different ways than we use them in modern 2018. So that was really the only issue that I had with it. But other than that, it was really entertaining, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. If you would like to see my complete thoughts on the play, I did make a book discussion for your viewing pleasure. So if you'd like to check that out, I will leave the link in the description, or I'll link it at the end of the video. The second book that I read last month is There's Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins, and I listened to this on audiobook. It was pretty good. I definitely applaud Stephanie on branching out from her usual genre of YA contemporary. This was very interesting. It was basically a book form of like a slasher. It was pretty creepy, but I liked that she kept a lot of her usual elements that she has in her other books, like character development, which I find is really important for a story. Things that are just plot-based don't really keep my interest. I have to be able to get behind characters, so there was a lot of character development in here, which you don't see very often in horror movies. And there were definitely some like elements of cutesy romance, even amidst all of the murder and gore and everything. So I liked that too. One issue that a lot of people were having with the book was that they liked the first half and they didn't like the second half. And I'm kind of assuming it's because halfway through the book you find out who the murderer is. So that kind of takes some of the suspense and mystery away from the rest of the novel. However, they did hold back like why the murderer was going around and killing all of these random people until the very end, so that was good. And it did keep my interest. I was actually like pretty excited to get to the end and find out, what was going on and catch the killer and everything. I think it would have been more interesting if we hadn't found out some of the things that we found out in the middle of the novel. So this one got a 3.5 stars from me. The next book that I read last month was Don't Look Back by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This was a thriller, and I also listened to it on audiobook. You find out right away that the main character has amnesia and has forgotten like her whole entire life. Like she doesn't even remember her name or anything at the beginning of the story, and her best friend is missing. Like the police find her at her parents' summer home and her best friend is missing, and they went missing at the same time, and she has amnesia. And so my first thought was like, oh great, like another amnesia mystery, because for whatever reason I have read like a few that take that route where the main character like doesn't remember anything, or like conveniently doesn't remember a specific chunk of time. So I was like, oh man, like this is so overdone at first. It definitely was able to keep my interest, and so I did end up enjoying it. It kept me guessing, like I had no idea who had committed the crime that happens in here. I did really enjoy this. It was very suspenseful. Like I said, I had the audiobook, but I read like the last 100 pages in physical form because I was riding in a car with a friend and they wanted to listen to music, so I brought the physical book along and made them drive so that I could finish this. And so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read last month is Notes from My Captivity by Kathy Parks. I really enjoyed this book. I've seen a lot of reviews saying that they could hardly get through it because the protagonist was so unlikable. And like, okay, so the protagonist is kind of a brat at the beginning of this story, but she goes through a really nice character arc, so I guess I didn't understand. I don't know. I really enjoyed this book, and I thought that her voice was very intriguing. Like, she was really funny, and so that kept my interest. I was laughing out loud. I cried a lot. I had a really great time, honestly, and I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. I do have a video where I discuss this book, also a reading vlog. The next book that I read last month was Tempest and Slaughter by Tamara Pierce, and this book is a fantasy that is a prequel to Tamara Pierce's other series, particularly the Immortals Quartet. So I had not read, I still haven't read any of her other books before going into this, and I definitely think that my experience would have been a lot better if I had read the Immortals Quartet at least before going into this book, because it doesn't have a whole bunch of plot points or really a huge major plot point even. Not a whole lot happens. Like, you mostly just see R.M. Draper, the main character, and like his friends going through school, like day to day, and a few interesting things happen, but it wasn't really like, you know, gripping. It took me a very long time to get through. I was just reading little pieces at a time. So I definitely would suggest reading Tamara Pierce's other stuff first, particularly the Immortals Quartet, so that you know the main character and you want to know what his life was like before that series started. I do own the Immortals Quartet now, and I'm really excited to read it because the writing was really amazing. I love the writing style and everything. It just like wasn't able to fully keep my interest to the point that I was just like, you know, flipping pages, which is something that I usually enjoy in a fantasy series. And that is why I only rated it 3 out of 5 stars. I also have a book discussion about this book, so I'll also leave it in the description or put it at the end if you want to check that out. The next book that I read last month is Through the Dark by Alexandra Bracken. And this is a bind-up of 3 novellas based on the Darkest Minds trilogy. The first one is called the first one is called In Time, the second one is Sparks Rise, and the third one is Beyond the Night. And the first one was the hardest to get into for me, but the other 2 were pretty gripping. I also gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars, but I think it probably would have been rated higher if I had read the Darkest Minds trilogy more recently. It's just been a really long time since I have read those books, and so I wasn't like quite as captivated by the world because I've been out of it for such a long time. And I will be making a book discussion video about this book, so look for that very soon. The next book that I read last month is Salt of the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. And this book was amazing. I read it on audiobook. It is a full cast of narrators. So this book is told from 4 different points of view, and it is read on Audible by 4 different narrators. And it was really good experience to listen to it, but I'm sure I would have had just as good of a time reading it myself. This book is just feels so real. Like, you feel like these characters are your friends, like all of them, except for one, but we're not going to talk about him because he can freaking die. Other than that, these characters just feel so just real and alive, and I cried a whole bunch of times throughout the book, but like the last hour of listening to the audiobook, I was like sobbing like out loud. It's really embarrassing. A book has never had that effect on me, so this was a just really phenomenal book, and I definitely could not give it anything but 5 stars. If there was a 6-star button, I would give it that. So thank you so much, Ruta Sepetys. This was amazing. She just has this way of finding these obscure pieces of history and bringing them to life so that you feel like you are there with them, and it is such a talent. The next book that I read last month was When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon, and this book was so cute. And just, yeah, everything that I look for in a contemporary. It was adorable, and Rishi was just so sweet and respectful, and she is this, like, independent feminist whose parents really want her to be involved in this arranged marriage with Rishi, but she just wants to be her own person and be a web developer, so she's going after what she wants, and I think that that's really cool. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read in the month of August is Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. And this book was everything. I can't even. Like, Simon is my new fictional best friend. He loves, like, Elliot Smith and Harry Potter and Adventure Time and just all of these things. I mean, not that your interests is necessarily what's good about you, but he was also just, like, so relatable, and I liked him as a person. And I also loved Aaliyah, who's another character in here. I definitely related to her. I felt like I could have been Leah in this story. And I am going to be making a book discussion video about this one as well. So make sure to watch for it if you have read this book and are interested in hearing my thoughts. I also watched the movie Love, Simon this month, and I will be making a review of the movie as well. This also definitely gets a 5 out of 5 stars from me. Moving on to all of the books that I am planning to read in this month, the month of September. So I always have different things that I want to accomplish each month with my TBR piles. The summer is kind of like a free-for-all for the most part, but the other months I kind of have a theme that I want to stick to, or just a certain thing that I want to do. So September is back to school month, and it is also a month in which I force myself to try new things. So I always want to make sure that the books that I read are by authors that I have never read before. So the first book that I am planning to read in the month of September is When My Name Was Keiko by Linda Sue Park, and I am required to read this in my children's literature class. The next book that I have to show you is also required by my children's literature class, and that is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne. The next book that I'm reading this month is a classic by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and that is The Scarlet Letter. I'm really excited to read this one because I just got this book from the Dollar Tree called The House of Hawthorne. It appears in my Stacks with Stevie video for August, and it is a reimagined narrative of Nathaniel Hawthorne's wife's life. The next book that I had to show you is written by an author who is very popular, and I just haven't picked anything of his up until now, and that is Adam Silvera. And the book that I have to read by him is History Is All You Left Me. The next book that I have to show you is another huge hype train that I missed, and that is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer, which is Cinder. And I'm very excited to join this fandom. The next book was not going to be on my TBR, but I decided to push it up on my TBR because Alex from Alex Black made a video reviewing both the books that was spoiler free, and she pointed out that she had just read them because she saw them on my shelves in my library tour, and so I decided to bump it up on my TBR and read it this month. And so I'm really excited to kind of share my thoughts on this book, and that book is Prisoner of Night and Fog by Anne Blankman. The next 4 books that I have to show you today are all going to be part of the Fall Into Reading-a-thon that is going to be taking place near the end of the month from September 22nd to September 28th. And it was created by Melanie from Completely Melanie and I think one other person. I'll leave her link in the description to that video in case you want to join the Fall Into Reading-a-thon. So I'm going to read you the challenges and show you the books that I have for each challenge. So the first challenge is School's in Session. Read the group pick, which is The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, which is what I'm going to do because the other option is to buddy read a book, and I have no friends in the real world that would buddy read with me because none of my friends read books for fun. So it's just me out here all by myself. The next challenge is The Leaves Are Falling. Read a book with orange, yellow, and or red on the cover. And I picked Confucius Jane by Katie Lynch, which as you can see is a red book. It also covers the next challenge, which is I Want S'mores. Read an ooey gooey romance book. I'm not sure how ooey gooey it is, but it does follow 2 girls who eventually fall in love. I thought it was going to cover the 4th challenge too, but then I reread it and I was totally wrong, so I had to pick a 4th book, which is why I have 10 books on my TBR instead of just 9. The 4th challenge is Pumpkin Spiced Lattes and Apple Picking. Read a book with a fruit or beverage on the cover or in the title. The book that I have that fulfills that challenge is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. And as you can see, there is a jar of honey on the cover, which honey is a beverage now, okay? And I will fight anyone who says otherwise, because it was either this or reread Twilight, and honey's a beverage. And the last challenge that we have for this readathon is number 5, Trick or Treat, read a spooky book. And so I picked a thriller, The Ridge by John Rector. Well, that is all the books that I had to talk about. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy my content, please make sure to subscribe. I make videos every Wednesday. If you want to check out any of my social media, the links will be down in the description. Hopefully, the cats and I will see you next week. Goodbye!